Some great footage there, Pep. It's always weird seeing yourself on TV, especially your voice, especially that Aussie accent with all the English.
Yeah, it stands out. They were going to put subtitles, I think. So.
Congratulations. And for those of you in the room that don't know Pep, how did you become a coach? How did you get started in coaching?
You're gonna send me this far back, are you?
If you can remember.
All right. I'd just come back from playing overseas in '96, I think it was, and sort of lost a little bit of passion to play. I was only 26, 27, and I suppose you're always sort of tinkering with coaching. I think I was a midfielder, so you're always looking at the game probably a little bit different to maybe say a goalkeeper. But I always had those qualities to want to teach, to want to change behaviour, to want to be involved in I suppose coaching and changing behaviour of players and people, and the journey started from there. And I just effectively just went back to my old club, Brunswick Juventus. Started in the junior ranks, so on, and just educated myself. And just grew through the NPL, through the old Victorian Premier League. Was lucky enough to be a head coach in men's with a couple of VPL sides quite young. I was only about 30, 31, 32, and it's pretty much grown from there.
Fantastic. So you enjoyed a huge amount of success with your time at Melbourne City. In the first season there, you went a whole season unbeaten. What do you attribute that success to?
Well, first of all, I think it was an absolute privilege to be given that opportunity to build something from scratch. And it was probably at a good time, even in my own coaching career, because my beliefs were a lot more solid on how I wanted to see a team and how I wanted to play, how I felt football should be played. And to be given the opportunity, especially at City, where there's an opportunity to start something from scratch was phenomenal. The main focus actually, funnily enough, wasn't the actual team. It was getting the infrastructure right. It was getting the backroom staff right. It was making sure that if I'm going to invite elite players into an environment, it needs to be a professional environment. It needs to be a real environment. So full-time goalkeeper coach, full-time doctor, full-time physios, full-time coaches. That was the main work, really. Once you create that environment, the players will come. The players will come because it was probably at a time where the women's game was wanting the opportunity to be involved or players were wanting to be involved in professional structures. So that was where all the major work was done. We had a salary cap, so we couldn't spend any more money than anyone else. But I made sure that the club spent the money in the right areas from an infrastructure point of view, because that's long-term investment. If you want to get it right, it has to be long-term, and hopefully they're reaping the rewards.
So we all know you as the players' coach, very much so in terms of your man management or woman management these days, we have to call it. How have you evolved as a coach over the years?
Wow, I think you're always evolving. I mean, I know it's a cliche. I know it's something that everyone says, but I think your beliefs even become stronger. And I think the beauty of your beliefs is that you learn how to implement them. You learn how to make them come to life, and you learn how to instill it in your players, that your players believe in the way you want to play and the journey that you're on. But again, I hear the buzzwords, philosophy and game plan and game style and all that. It's magnificent that you've got that, but I always ask the question, how do you bring it to life? What are the day-to-day things that you do to bring it to life? What is the language you use to bring this to life? Because then your players believe in it, or you teach your players to believe in it, and then they carry it out. So I think that's probably where I've evolved.
And you've worked with both male and female. Are there key points that, like James reiterated earlier, that there are certain things that females and males differ in? We're essentially footballers, and it's all the same really, but are there key things that you tweak when working with male and female?
Females listen better. They ask the question that I love, why? And what are we doing? Where with men, and I don't want to put this all in a pool
in a big bucket.
Yeah, in a big bucket of men. That didn't come out right. That didn't come out right. That didn't come out right.
Sorry, skip over that.
Yeah, it was just yeah. I think you can sort of get away with putting things on for the sake of putting them on at times, and I love that in women's football. I love that I get questioned all the time because it makes me better. It makes me a better coach because I can't design one part of the session that is not pertaining to what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. I can actually see that as as a female player that we definitely question a lot more than the males. They kind of just walk out there and do what's asked of them. What can we learn here in Australia? You've spent a little bit of time in the UK now, not a long time, but what are some of the standout things that you think we could learn here in Australia about the UK?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's always difficult to compare the cultures. I mean, there's a football industry, there's a football culture that's been there for many years. It is in the hotbed of world football, which is Europe. So, we know that we get more games. We know we get more high-level games more often, more consistently. And obviously, there's more training. There's just more volume of what they do. There's more. There's just more, but it's done at a level which the intensity and the detail is at a high level, and I think we just need to create more opportunities, A, to train, B, to play high level games where they're going to be challenged quite a lot. Because as I said, it's no use having 30 games and only 8 of them are worthwhile games where they're being challenged, especially juniors or academy players. You need 30 games of that. That's where they learn. They learn on the pitch. They learn solving problems on the pitch, and somehow we have to achieve that. We have to achieve that day to day, that week to week volume, but high level intensity games. High-level games.
Do you think there needs to be a supportive culture around that? I mean, everyone can just throw on games every weekend, but what sort of support networks are you using to ensure that these players, even though they've got an increased load capacity, what are they doing to stay fit and healthy throughout because I'm sure female athletes differ.
Yeah, look, I think the reality is that, we talk about investment, we talk about, money and so on. I gave the example of Melbourne City. Melbourne City wasn't built with the players we bought. Melbourne City was built with the support staff and the infrastructure. And I just think that we sometimes look at, we haven't got that, we can't do that, we can't do this. Well, why don't we innovate and look at what we can do within the structure that we've got? All right, you've only got 10 balls to train with. Okay, well, still make it the best session that it is. I think sometimes we just need to be a little bit more proactive and innovative in that, instead of worrying about, okay, what we don't have, let's worry about what we got and what we can achieve. And if it's putting on an extra session, it's putting on an extra session. If it's a matter of getting players there before school, let's make it work, let's make it happen. They don't cost money.
Yeah. And do you think culturally, what are the differences? Because we've been talking and discussing about language and unconscious bias in terms of male and female. What have you seen in the UK that may help our clubs on the ground level here? What do you see implemented?
Yeah, that's always a difficult question. I'm privileged to be at a club that's had 30 years of women's football, and there's no disparity. You walk into London Colney, which is our training facility, and the people don't see any disparity between the men's and the women's. It's a successful team. It's part of their elite teams. But the thing that really stands out is the people and the ability for them to want to really develop the game. And even in our academy, where they don't put a lot of money into our academy at Arsenal, but yet, coaches, programs, training 4 times a week, the proper support, the proper goalkeeping coach, everything's there, the support's there. So I don't know, maybe it is it is more going back to infrastructure and how we can innovate with what we've got instead of worrying about what we don't have.
And talking about them as athletes rather than female, male, and what they're costing the club rather than, what we're implementing. What programs do they have in place to promote and support the coaches, though? What do you think that they're doing right?
The biggest thing that I've seen is the FA, the money that the FA put into coaches development. There's always coaching programs. There's always regional programs, coach the coaches, and even the national team programs. Like we'll lose a lot of our under 16s, 17s, and 18s. Probably every 5 to 8 weeks they're on a week camp. But it's not just those players. It could be that regional team from that whole area, or those players from that whole area. So there's consistent national programs, and even the academy coaches get invited into the national programs. So they'll go there and they'll spend time with the national coaches and develop those scenarios. So the FA, there's a massive push also from an FA perspective to really develop the coaches at grassroots level, and promote the game from that perspective also. Are
they making a significant effort to promote female coaches, or what are they doing?
Absolutely.
In terms of females?
There's really no disparity. It's sort of like Arsenal, as I said, the national team coaches will put on a camp. And effectively through that they'll do a lot of the coaching the coaches, and they'll invite from the London area, they'll invite the academy coaches from Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, West Ham, so on and so on, to go and be part of it.
What's sort of the ratio of female to males in the room? Do you see any of that? What sort of numbers are we looking at? I mean, it's hard to know exactly, but what do you think?
With a lot of the national coaches, especially the women's national coaches, it's usually females. Females, yeah. There'd be a couple of males who are working in the academies that will go, but mainly females.
Fantastic. And do you think that you can see the growth of women's football in Australia equating to what you see in the UK?
Again, different cultures, different scale of culture. Obviously there's more games, there's more, television. There's a live game on BBC, and then you can get a game on pay-per-view, BT. We've got a highlights package which runs just after match of the day, the men's on Sunday night, and then there's a women's football program on Monday. So that exposure's there. Look, I just think that the W League, from my perspective, has to have some sort of level of continuity. It needs to have some sort of presence 12 months of the year. It needs to be in people's faces. But again, going back, let's get the infrastructure right, let's get the product right, let's get the coaching right, let's get the product to the level that we believe it should be, and I'm sure the game will boom here.
I did have a question pop up into my head right then, but then I lost it, so we'll skip over that. I will just say, make sure that you get your questions ready for Pep, because I'll be opening to the floor.
Are you calling me Pep?
Yeah, I'll call you Pep as well.
They
can call you Pep.
Okay.
You want to call him Pep? Good. Joseph Montemurro. I don't know. Oh, spill your water. Last question. I want to know what made you change from male to female. What broadened your scope? Because I know there's a lot of coaches that have to be. There's something that switches on. Like they're usually asked whether they'd like to coach the female team, and they reluctantly say yes, and then suddenly they're hooked. What's your story there?
I looked at it as football.
That's a good answer.
You've probably heard it all before. I looked at it as football. I was coaching football, and what an opportunity to instill what you want to do, to instill your way, to learn, to grow with whatever level of athletes they're at. I mean, I've been lucky to have worked at good levels. NTC programs, Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City. So I've been surrounded by amazing people, and I think there's a social aspect to women's football which I think is it's so passionate and so important to the game, and I hope it never gets lost. I hope it's a little bit freer. It's a little bit more. Let's try something. Let's do something. Let's really innovate. And the growth and the willingness to learn is amazing. I'm hooked.
Fantastic, good answer. Would there be any questions from the floor? Joe and Tess, There we go. Sinisa?
Yep.
Sinisa, you're going to sing a song, are you?
The microphone, can we have the floor microphones on?
You got a loud voice anyway. I've heard you on the bench, so
Just scream.
just scream it, mate. Just yeah. How are you, Sinisa?
I admire what you're doing, and I mean, a lot of people maybe in this room don't know how hard you work and how much time you put in to get where you are today. And that's a lesson maybe for all the coaches around. But at the same time, what I admire about you is that you stay the same person as you are, and you're willing to help every coach, or if they've got a question, and you're willing to put a helping hand around. My question to you would be, how did you find that transition from going from Melbourne City to Arsenal, and were you able to implement your own philosophy without, obviously, do they have their own guidelines or philosophy that men have that you needed to obviously implement?
There's been a guy at Arsenal. He's been there for 22 years. Wenger, is that his name?
Yeah.
Wenger.
Yeah.
And I was privileged enough to spend some time and meet him. And he's like one of us. Sinisa, he's so humble and amazing. But the most amazing thing is that it's so infectious within the club. Like, you'll meet the grounds person, you'll meet the CEO, and they're just all just humble, good people that love the club and have created an identity for the club. And I've been lucky enough to be given the opportunity to instill my beliefs in the women's team. Now, in saying that, I'd have to say that Arsenal probably wouldn't employ a long ball, channel ball sort of coach. So I'd like to think that they probably did their due diligence and said, okay, well, there's a little bit of football played. He's the sort of coach that suits our style. And when I presented, it was pretty much in line with what they do. We have some guidelines in terms of more about behaviour than actual you have to play like this, or you have to build up like this, or you have to, set your middle third like that. It's more about behaviour and what is Arsenal. I mean, it's got an identity where, you take that red strip off and you put a green one on, it's Arsenal playing. So, and that's all thanks to Arsene Wenger, who's created an identity, a worldwide identity for the club and what it means. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Well, I would like to know though, walking into a club like Arsenal, are you just like, that's like...
Yeah, I'm still in a bit of disbelief, to be honest.
You walk in, you walk back out, you look out.
I've been a fan all my life.
Yeah.
So, to be there and, you sort of put, every morning I'll put the tracksuit on and to go training and saying, is this sort of really happening? So I'm still coming down from the high. That's the honest truth. That's
good. Anyone else? Up the back?
So you said that if you create the environment, the players can come. That's something that we're trying to work at our club. So what kind of things would you think about are the things that we need to work on our environment at a grassroots level, at our community level? Like, we might not have that much money, but what kind of things do we need to work at to really bring female players into our community, into our club kind of thing?
What age group?
Well, currently we have a State 1 team, but our juniors, that's something that we really need to start working at, kind of.
I think you need to create a team of people that believe in the way you want to see football played at your club. I just think you've got to create an environment where the only thing they want to do, whether you train Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or whatever it is, that they want to be there because the sessions mean something, because the football means something, and being at the club means something. I would start simply with, getting good people, 4 or 5 good people that you can say for 3-4 years, you are going to do this philosophy, this idea, this way we want to play. and more importantly, make it enjoyable, but more importantly, make it worthwhile when someone comes to your club, when a parent comes there, when someone comes, when a player walks in that door.
Thank you.
Gee.
You were in the UK for 4 months, is that correct?
No, I landed on the 20th. I landed in November, 20th, mid-November.
Okay. Currently we're experiencing great success with our Matildas team, and I think we're probably just one step away from possibly winning a World Cup, or definitely winning a World Cup. Is our sport, our women's sport, our football here revered in the UK or in Europe? It's probably not fair to ask that. And will we see, if it is, will we see British players coming to our shores and getting part, being part of that football here in Australia?
Answer to the first question, yes, Australia is noted for its national team, and there's lots of talk of Sam Kerr, obviously. So it is a brand that I think is a special brand, and one that we need to somehow utilise to bring this game forward. How we do it, I hope in this room we come up with some ideas and we push it forward. And again, long-term thinking. The second thing, it's always going to be difficult to get European players into the W League, because I'll give Arsenal as the perfect example. The WSL runs with the men's, runs with the EPL, so it runs during the summer, or the Australian summer, our winter. And unless you're getting a player on loan or getting a player out of contract, it's always going to be very, very difficult. And that's for the WSL 1 and the WSL 2, which are the pro leagues. And now they've called the WSL 2 the championship to align it with the men's. Germany's the same. Germany runs in that they have a winter break, but it's very, very, very rare that you'll get a player from Bayern Munich coming for those 6 weeks during the winter break. It's just I suppose a timing and a calendar issue that doesn't work. Yeah, so it's always going to be difficult. So that's why probably the US is the best destination for players to come into the W League.
Contractual nightmare for players. Even if they are in the country, it usually takes a while for them to get their papers cleared.
There's two reasons I brought that up. Obviously to improve the profile of our women's game here, bring crowds, and also I think that the world would take more notice if we would have high-profile players playing with our Matildas and in our W League as well.
Yep. Right behind you, if you can pass the mic.
Too many questions, but I'm going to go with one that I've been involved in a variety of clubs and in a variety of different roles over the years, and this one seems to come up quite a bit, and different clubs have different stance on it, I suppose. But I'm thinking more of at a community level, I guess. What's your opinion on, I suppose, where they sort of put their efforts and their resources initially, because there is a finite amount of them, in terms of focusing primarily on senior teams, even if it's not at a really high level, but on the senior teams with the idea that that's going to hopefully draw in more juniors? Or do you focus on the junior teams in an effort to build up the club in the hopes that they will then go on to form the senior teams? Because nobody obviously has the answer for it, and it does depend on circumstance, club, etc. But I was just curious to know what your opinion or opinions are on that.
Did you want to answer that? Or?
No, you go.
You haven't got an answer, have you?
There's some experience in that one.
Got an answer, have you? Great question. I'll only speak for my personal opinion, so this may work or may not work. It's got to be long term. It has to be long term. And I can guarantee you, when you're thinking senior team sort of scenario, it's always just for that 12 months, just for that short term. And I'm sorry if I'm going over the, because I've seen it at too many clubs where there's just a massive investment in the top team with the hope. But that's 12 months, because those players will move on. They'll look for more money. They'll look for something else. It has to be long term. It has to be long term. And going back to the coaching, I would invest money in 4 or 5 coaches, give them good money, invest your money there, where you're staying here for 4 or 5 years. That's all. You're not moving. You're staying here for 4 or 5 years. I don't care. You're not going. It's got to be long term. Simple as that. It can't be short term. Did I answer part of it?
It made it probably harder for you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Am I allowed to double dip? Sorry.
One more?
One more.
My second question was, I sort of suppose following on from that, in terms of attitudes and philosophies within a club, especially at the clubs that are community-based and sometimes very low standards, sometimes in terms of the playing. And so occasionally with that, people kind of don't worry so much about the attitudes and philosophies and things like that amongst the club or the teams because of that standard.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you think that is still in those clubs to have, I suppose, some continuity amongst the teams when you've got volunteer coaches and things like that to still try and, I suppose, not push an agenda, but push a general attitude amongst the club and amongst the people involved in it?
That's a brilliant question, because I think we tend to think of that more from a footballing perspective, with this football playing style. I would be going more for people values, people. Because you're in the people's game, you're changing behaviour. A 13-year-old girl or boy is coming to your backyard, your ground to learn, to develop as a person. Me, if I was at community level, I would be putting values, 3 values, respect, integrity. They're the 3 things that are non-negotiable. Because when all the coaches start speaking that language, then you start to create a philosophy. Then your game style will start to fall into place. Then your style of working starts to fall into place. I would be thinking more from a people's perspective in terms of the values.
Hey, we had a presentation earlier that spoke about how the coaches at a top end, often women's coaches can be appointed without having had experience prior. And obviously in England, they recently appointed the head coach of the women's team who hadn't had any experience prior. How did you react to that, and what about the other high-level coaches around you?
I think Phil didn't have any experience coaching at all, did he?
I think he's trained in Valencia for a short time.
He was with his brother for 2 weeks, I think it was, something like that. I've been lucky enough to have met Phil, because he started pretty much when I started, so there's been a little bit of a connection. It was purely I think a decision coming from where they'd come from with the whole Mark Sampson scenario, to make sure that the image of the game was upheld and to get a profile person in. To boot, he's a very, very good coach, by the way. Very, very good. And look, it is something that they did a lot of due diligence. I know Nick Cushing, who was one of my colleagues at City, was in for the job. There was a few people in for the job that had been from women's background. I think it was more a balance of marketing and more a balance of the profile of the game, and then someone who could bring, I think, an extra level of profile to the game at that point. But it's a very good question that you ask, because again, the pool, how big's the pool out there of that level of coaches that have done that experience,
I will say that Phil applied for the job, though, didn't he?
I don't know. I wasn't on the panel.
He would have had to have applied, surely. It's not a background like, mate, can you take the national team for us?
You've been involved in the game long enough, Bubs.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah,
I know he applied. Who else? Got time for maybe 2 more.
Ricardo.
Hey, John. Thanks. Look, probably we as a coaches always questioning ourselves and trying to compare our players, Australian players, with the European players, South American players, and we always end up complaining about the quality of tactically and technically. From your point of view, how big is this gap actually from the Australian players, let's say women? You have been here involved in the high-level development for women, and compare with the ones in Europe. How big is the gap actually, and how can we close this gap?
Again, I don't think it's a huge gap. What it is, they've been exposed to different different modules of playing or different ways of playing and different adaptations of playing for a longer period, over a longer period of time. So by 15, 14, they're already playing different systems. They're already playing 3 at the back. They're already playing 5 across the middle, so on and so on. So all it's been is exposure to adapt to these things. And again, as I said before, it's just volume. It's more. They do more of it. They get more games. They get more competitive games. And I was... The part that I'm loving the most, obviously being an Arsenal and all that, is that every week there's a different system. There's someone doing something different. There's someone who's who's playing with 3 up top, but one of their wingers stays more inside. There's someone who's playing with 3 up top, but one of their strikers is coming really, really low. Every week. And you've just got to solve these problems. You've got to solve these problems on a week-to-week basis. And that's probably just exposure to a lot of things, exposure to a lot of different systems and structure from young ages.
We've got one final question, Dean.
Joe, as a concerned Arsenal supporter, how come you haven't landed Sam Kerr as yet, knowing that Sam is a Arsenal supporter herself?
She costs too much money.
But you said you built the infrastructure around to get the players there.
I knew I was going to get this question. I knew it. Sam's a phenomenal player.
Any chance, you think?
Any chance? Look, we've done our signings for the year, so we're right. Now, Sam's... to be honest, I don't know. I don't know where she's... I know there are a few European clubs after her. But I think she's got a long-term contract in the US. She's obviously got her Matilda's scenario, so and I presume she'd want to be with the Matildas as long as she can, leading into the World Cup. So I don't think anything's really going to happen with her until 1920, the summer of 1920, after the World Cup next year. So yeah, but yes, I hear you. I've been asked this question a few times. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we have time for, so thank you so much, Pep.